Crisis Shortcuts is brought to you by Mindstream, music designed to help you, your loved ones, and even your pets feel calmer. Check out Mindstream, that's Mind with a Y, on all the usual streaming platforms. Welcome to Crisis Shortcuts with me, Andy Coulson. Occasional bonus episodes to sit neatly alongside the main podcast, Crisis What Crisis. And much like those longer conversations in Shortcuts, you'll hear from brilliant people who, in their own words, tell us about their crises, how they got through them, and what they've learned. Although these episodes are brief, the insights are just as big. So if you're short on time but looking for inspiration or guidance, Crisis Shortcuts will offer a quick fix for useful lessons provided by those who've been there and lived to tell the tale. And don't forget, you can still join me for our longer conversations on Crisis What Crisis, where we talk in greater depth and share those powerful coping strategies that will hopefully help guide you through the pitfalls of life. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Our handle is at Crisis What Crisis Podcast. And if you like what you hear, please do head over to Apple and leave us a rating and review. It really does help make sure that these stories get to the widest possible audiences. I hope you enjoy this Crisis Shortcut.
I'm Dr. Roopa Farooki. I'm a junior doctor for the NHS, specialised in internal medicine. I was born in Lahore in Pakistan. My mum's from Bangladesh. My dad's from Pakistan. I've heard anecdotally that the reason they came to the UK was because my dad had too many girlfriends in Paris. So my mother didn't want to put up with that. We came over on a visitor's visa and we stayed. I eventually got British citizenship when I was 16 and went through all my schooling in the UK. My parents had an interesting relationship, and there was a lot of love for each other. But my dad was a gambler, which I've written about in the past, and he lost family money several times until we were pretty much bankrupt. And then he took the checkbooks and disappeared when I was 13, saying he was going to the shops and never came back. When I'd kind of gone through university and I'd kind of finished Oxford, he turned up to say how proud he was and asked for money. Which I guess was a compliment because it showed that I could finally not only support myself but support him. After university, my second proper job, my first proper job was working in finance, just because I really needed to pay off some student loans. So I did a year in what was Arthur Andersen at the time, and it's now Deloitte. I went into advertising. I remember the job I enjoyed most was when I was handling and representing the charities and doing things that were involved with medicine. So when I was at Saatchi's, I was a director on the multiple sclerosis account, which is still, even when I'm in medicine now and I come across someone with those kinds of neurological diseases, just so hard to treat and look after. I think that those were the things that were really important to me. I was a new junior doctor, just starting in the August of 2019. I'd obviously been training in hospitals for 4 years previously, including the hospital where I was working. I started off in ITU, and it was, I think it was as you expect. It was every kind of junior doctor's kind of stressful moments that you have. But a lot of that was tempered by the knowledge that my sister was dying during that time. And it had started just when I'd finished medical school. I was on my elective in the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London. And my sister was having her chemotherapy literally up the road at the Marsden. And I think she was actually trying to keep the fact that she started having weekly chemo from us until I'd actually started working at that hospital. And she knew there was no way she could keep it from me, because I would be literally walking past her. She did tell me earlier in the year that she didn't think she'd make it until Christmas, and this, I think, was the week before. And she did make it through Christmas and made it through, a little bit afterwards. And when she passed away, when I came back, I came back the day after her funeral, and I was sent home. But literally straight after that, the pandemic was happening. And the thing is, we were all so busy working, doing our jobs, we almost didn't notice the kind of the volume and the escalation of it taking over. There were these emails, and it wasn't until, I think, the day before lockdown where it all became completely crystallized and clear that, oh my God, this is what we've been doing every single day. We have been working at the center of this storm, this eye of the storm, and now we're finally saying it out loud. This is a pandemic. This is lockdown. We are probably doing the most dangerous job in the country, and we are so unprotected and so kind of ignorant of everything. As a doctor, it's important to try and be there for your patient, to try and put what's happening personally aside and just be as present as you can for them at this moment in time. And there are boundaries. Obviously, there should be boundaries. But I think, if I'm completely honest, I think boundaries were blurred during this moment of crisis. I think to kind of function as a human being, we're not automatons, we're not machines. And I'd actually, I'll admit that when I was looking after someone who was grieving, I would say that, I've just lost someone too. It wasn't to put myself in their story in any way. It's just to say that, I have some sense of what it is to walk in your shoes, and I can't possibly, because I'm not sitting, I'm not the one who's being excluded from my mother's bedside at this time when she might be passing away. And I think, what we owe our patients, we owe them our duty of care, but we also owe them, I feel very strongly about this, a duty of candor. We owe them the truth. I was very aware of how much I was holding back from telling my mum, because she just lost one daughter, and now she had another one working somehow by accident, flung from space into this pandemic. We lost a nurse very early in the pandemic, who'd been working in the acute medical unit and who everyone knew and liked, and she'd got the virus from looking after patients, from looking after other people, and that's how she'd got it. And it was becoming quite clear that BAME clinicians and nurses were at more risk. We didn't quite know why, and there were lots of explanations about possibly why, but the first 3 clinician deaths were BAME, and so a lot of the young BAME junior doctors and nurses came in with fear. They came in with fear every day, and so I think that we all just got on and did our jobs, because frankly, if we didn't, who would? The new things that we learn day by day about how, government leadership was actually behaving at the time, it makes it even worse, because while we were going through this time where we actually thought that, quite honestly, during those first 40 days, I was wondering whether or not I would contract the virus and die, because I was in the demographic that died, and I was at more risk than anyone I knew. While we were going through that knowledge, going through that day, going through our working days, trying to help people every day with that knowledge, other people were sitting having, summer parties. Officially in the hospital, if you don't say someone is deteriorating in one of the COVID aerosol generating procedure rooms, you technically, if they're deteriorating, you don't go in until you have the PPE. That's the official plan. If we're doing a cardiac arrest and someone is COVID positive, you're meant to take the little sack with you on the emergency call. A patient who was deteriorating, who I had to go and look after, this patient had 2 negative COVID tests, despite being very obviously symptomatic and with all the signs, including chest X-ray. And so they were still in a regular bay. And when they started deteriorating, we didn't really have, I didn't have time to even put on the apron and the gloves, and the mask, which is all we need for that bay. I had a mask, I think, because I always had to wear one. And so I raced in to help and to stabilize that patient. And I didn't even think about it, and the patient threw up all over me, and then later proved was COVID positive on the 3rd test. I don't know any other doctor who would have done it differently. There wasn't actually, for that particular patient, there wasn't the PPE available, because that patient, even though they were COVID positive, they hadn't been defined as such, and so it wasn't available on our ward. Any wards which didn't have properly defined COVID patients, we didn't have the PPE. They were all swept off our wards and taken to the respiratory wards, and which needed them. At the time, I felt, this is criminal, isn't it? Isn't it criminal negligence to let people pass away like this, to actually have it in your power to prevent this, and to actually make decisions that will ensure that people will die? I felt that this government, if they're kind of treating Britain like some kind of big corporation, in any other corporation where leadership is actually allowing personnel to actually die based on these decisions, they should be held to account. They shouldn't be continue in position, and they should be held to account. I find it stunning. The kind of autocracy that somehow Britain has become, that allows to keep these career politicians who are making these dangerous decisions for furthering personal career goals and personal fortunes, to actually remain in power. At the time, we were all a little bit ignorant about the Italian trajectory of La Quarantina and what was happening there. But anyone in government had that information. They would have seen the trajectory from Italy, from when it first started, from when there was maybe a dozen or 2 dozen dead, to 2 weeks later, and where that would lead us. and they didn't act. They made a decision not to act. I think that even locking down 2 weeks beforehand would have made an extraordinary difference, the number of lives that we lost in that early part of the pandemic. It still makes me angry now. And that was me then, without the knowledge of the fact that while we were giving up an ITU bed for a prime minister, that at the same time, they were absolutely not leading by example, not doing what they could to stem the flow of the virus, not even personally following the rules that they put in place for the population, which were robbing relatives from their last moments with their families. They were robbing someone's last moment with their mother, someone's last moment with their child, while they themselves actually felt entitled. And it's incredible. It is just pure entitlement. And I find it astonishing that a democracy actually tolerates this, that they felt entitled to break these rules themselves, to have one set of rules for others and the other for themselves. And they were actually quite happy to sit and have drinks in a private garden with each other, while other people were unable to actually go and hold the hand of their relative while they were passing away. This current government, the whole kind of get Brexit done thing, the use of the NHS potential income on the bus, they've been using our healthcare service as a way to kind of shore up their own political profile and gain without actually giving anything back. And I remember when the Prime Minister came out of the hospital and his wife was tearfully saying, oh, no one can ever thank the NHS enough. And yes, they bloody well can thank the NHS enough. They can do something. They should, frankly, do their jobs. You know, it is a matter of public record that lies have been told. You know, even a lie as simple as, oh, I didn't know that there were any parties being held in number 10. And then, oh, yes, but I was at one. And even little things that could have been done haven't been done. So, for example, the FFP2 mask that actually protect the wearer as opposed to protecting the people around the wearer. The regular masks only work if everyone is collegiate and actually everyone wears them, because you need to protect. You're wearing the mask, you're not protecting yourself as much as protecting others. In my understanding of the evidence, which is always changing and may change. But as an FFP2, again, from my understanding of the evidence from management meetings, which I was sitting in over last year with hospital leadership, actually protect the wearer. And they should have been made available to all frontline workers, to all bus drivers, to all shopkeepers, to all teachers. And somehow a decision was made that they were not. Also, in terms of the respect and to the care workers in the community, I have on the geriatrics ward, I have patients that my team have actually fixed. We've got them better. They don't need any more medical input now. And they're still on the ward because we can't discharge them because there's no one to look after them in the community. There's no one who can actually take care of them. And Rishi Sunak, fairly recently on TV, when he was being questioned about the poor pay of a care worker, said, well, they could retrain and do something better. So how, with that kind of disregard and contempt from higher levels of government, how is anyone actually expected to do the jobs which will actually get us out of this crisis, or at least help the lot of the people doing least well in this crisis? I think the term frontline and all the metaphor and imagery of battle in the beginning of the pandemic, I felt it was overused and misused. I think it's the comparison of us as kind of warriors in kind of blue scrubs going out. I think it did us a disservice actually as healthcare professionals, because it implied somehow that this is what we'd chosen. It implied a kind of foolhardy courage, and it implied that we didn't have the right to complain because this was our job, wasn't it? This is what you do. You go into battle, for your patients. And no one actually went into healthcare thinking, oh yes, I'm going to work at the forefront of a pandemic. No one did that. But somehow there was the expectation that, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, you made your decision, stop whining and put up with it. That comparison of us to being on a battlefield and as though we are soldiers who have made a decision and taken a contract. No one made that decision. And particularly, I think the overseas workers, no one thought that they were going to come across to Britain to hopefully give, to get their qualifications, to hopefully kind of create a good life for themselves and their families. No one thought they were going to actually just lay down their life for the NHS. I still talk to my sister Kiron. I think people are only really lost when they're lost in memory. And I think it was really important for me to kind of keep her there. It can sometimes seem a bit pathological, can't it, to be talking someone who isn't there to be having these conversations. And I argued with myself, saying, no, it's not. It's normal. I know it's perfectly normal to have these conversations, and to want someone to be there to try and keep them, because that your loved ones are still part of you, and you can carry on, have these conversations and have them still there. But you don't really want to say it out loud. You don't want to say that, I'm having conversations about what you'd make of all this, because it sounds like, I guess it sounds like the truth. It sounds like you haven't let go. If grief is the long shadow left by love, then, I think it's all right to keep it there. I'm not sure, frankly, whether she'd be annoyed with me thinking, oh my God, it's all about you again, isn't it? But there you go. I'm trying to think about whether writing the book was helpful, actually. I think it wasn't so much something that I wanted to do. I think maybe like all kind of writing, it's something that I just had to do. I think I wrote it because I think sometimes as writers, we just write because we must, not because it's good for us, not because it's even helpful, and not because we're thinking of any kind of end game. I think it was just something I had to do. I had to just try and unwind this sense of the day. I persisted in it. I persisted in writing it. And eventually I thought it might be helpful to share, if it's helpful for anyone to actually have a sense of what it is like to kind of to grieve through everything that was going through, to understand that they weren't alone, then maybe it's worth sharing. It's not about me. It's about us. And I think for that reason, I'm kind of taking one for the team and putting out my kind of embarrassing personal kind of musings and my sense of what it was to go through this pandemic, this crisis, day by day, in the hope that it's useful for for others, and maybe it will be useful for a future self, for a future me, who will look back at this time from a place of wisdom. My first crisis cure is your routine. I think stick to your routine and what creates comfort in your routine. So for me, it's always whatever time I'm getting up, I always do half an hour of exercise, and that includes a bit of yoga. And I've done that for years, even when I was getting a 4 a.m. train into to London to do a placement, which involved me having to clerk everyone in before surgery. I always do that, and I always feel better for doing it. So that's my first crisis cure: stick to your routine and whatever comforts you in that routine. So for me, it would be that exercise. My second crisis cure, for me, I guess this is a personal one, would be to write. I always write a little bit, write every day, and try and just kind of make some little sense of what's happening in my life. And sometimes it could be a little, or it could be a lot. But I think that time, as opposed to kind of reading or doom scrolling through everyone else's thoughts, I think sometimes collect your own thoughts and to put them down. I think that's really, really helpful for me. My third crisis cure is believe in what you love, believe in what you're passionate about. And so for me, I've always been passionate about looking after my patients and providing care. And even now, going through all of this, I still think, would I do anything else? It's like, no, there is nothing else that I would rather do than do what I do every day, to go in and actually look after people and get them better day by day. So believe in what you're passionate about and pursue it.
Yeah,